It was that cold November night in 1969 when Johnny Cash stepped into a forgotten studio in Memphis, not knowing that the song he was about to record would never be heard again. But what he really didn't know was the secret that studio had been keeping for 20 years. Memphis, 1969. It was one of those dark November nights. Johnny Cash was returning from tour, driving his car along Highway 61. He was tired. For the last 3 weeks, he'd been on stage almost every night in a different city. His voice was a bit hoarse, his throat hurt, but there was a melody in his head, a song. Not yet finished, words not quite settled, but a melody that gnawed at him from within. This melody had been following him for days. He heard it when he woke up in the morning, heard it driving on the road, even heard it ringing in his ears when he lay down in bed at night. It was as if the song wasn't Johnny's, but someone else's, and Johnny was just a vessel chosen to bring it into the world. Johnny, who should have been heading back to Nashville, made a different decision at the last minute. He was in Memphis anyway. Maybe he'd find a small studio, quickly record this song, get it out of his head. Sometimes it was like that. A melody would stick in your head, and you couldn't rest until you recorded it somewhere. Johnny slowed his car and pulled into a gas station. He asked the old attendant, "Is there a small recording studio around here?" The man looked at Johnny, recognized him. Everyone recognized Johnny Cash, but the man wasn't surprised, wasn't excited. He just nodded and pointed outside. End of Beale Street. Turn onto Union Avenue. There's an old building, Samuel's place. But nobody goes there anymore, Mr. Cash. Why not? The man shrugged. Don't know. Samuel's a strange man. Used to be good there, but he doesn't take many clients anymore. Johnny thanked him, filled up with gas, and followed the directions. Those deserted Memphis streets grew even quieter as midnight approached. When he turned onto Union Avenue, he saw an old 2-story building. From the outside, it didn't look like a busy place. No lights in the windows, just a small sign at the entrance. Samuel's Recording Studio, established, 1948. Johnny parked his car and approached the door. He knocked. After waiting a while, he heard soft footsteps from inside. The door slowly opened and an old man appeared. He must have been in his 60s. His hair had gone white. His eyes carried a deep exhaustion. But when he saw Johnny, his eyes widened slightly. "Mr. Cash," the man said. His voice was raspy, as if he hadn't spoken to anyone in a long time. "I recognize you, of course. I'm Samuel. How can I help you?" Johnny smiled. "I know it's strange to come to your studio at midnight, but I have a song in my head. I need to record it. It'll be a simple recording, won't take much of your time." Samuel looked at Johnny for a while. He was hesitating. Then he slowly stepped back and opened the door. "Come in," he said. Johnny entered. The studio was small, but warm. On the walls were old photographs, musicians from the 1940s and 50s. Johnny didn't recognize any of them. Maybe none of them had become famous. Maybe they'd all tried their luck in this small studio, recorded a few songs, and then disappeared into life. Samuel led Johnny to the small recording room. In the center stood an old microphone, RCA 44BX. Johnny knew this microphone. It was used in radio broadcasts in the 1940s. Heavy, solid, had a beautiful sound. "This microphone is old," Johnny said. Samuel nodded. "Yes, it's been here since 1947. This microphone has recorded many songs, Mr. Cash. It's heard many voices." When Johnny approached the microphone, he noticed that the old studio owner Samuel's hands were trembling slightly. Samuel wanted to tell him something, but the words froze on his lips. "Is something wrong, Samuel?" Johnny asked. Samuel quickly pulled himself together. No, it's just, no one's come to this studio to record in a long time. I'm a bit surprised." Johnny put on the headphones and stood in front of the microphone. Samuel went to the control room and began preparing the old recording equipment. Tapes were loaded, knobs adjusted. Everything was ready. "Whenever you're ready, Mr. Cash," Samuel said through the intercom. Johnny closed his eyes. He felt the melody inside him. He strummed his guitar, and he began to sing. The song was slow, melancholic. It spoke of a journey, a man's journey home. But that home no longer existed. Maybe it never had. Maybe that man was forever a traveler, and going home was just a dream. When Johnny finished the song, there was silence. He opened his eyes. Samuel was sitting in the control room, looking at Johnny through the glass. His eyes were moist. Johnny removed the headphones and went to the control room. "How was it?" he asked. Samuel's voice was trembling. It was beautiful, Mr. Cash. Very beautiful. But, Samuel paused, then took a deep breath. A long time ago, another young man also recorded in this studio. His song was like yours, too. He also sang about a journey, about going home. Johnny sat down. What happened to that man? What Samuel told him made Johnny's blood run cold. That boy sang into this microphone just like you did, Mr. Cash. The next morning when the police came, the recordings were still running, but Tommy Joe was never seen again. Johnny sat in the dimly lit control room, staring at Samuel. The old man's face had gone pale, as if speaking that name, Tommy Joe, had drained something vital from him. Never seen again? Johnny repeated. What do you mean? Samuel stood up slowly, walked to a filing cabinet in the corner, and pulled out a worn folder. Inside were yellowed newspaper clippings from 1950. He laid them on the desk in front of Johnny. The headline read, "Local musician vanishes after recording session." Johnny picked up the clipping and read, Tommy Joe Williams, 23 years old, aspiring country singer. Last seen at Samuel's recording studio on November 18, 1950. His car was found parked outside the next morning. His guitar was still in the recording room, but Tommy Joe was gone. The police questioned me for weeks, Samuel said quietly. They thought I had something to do with it, but I didn't, Mr. Cash. I swear to God I didn't. Tommy Joe finished his recording around 2 a.m. I helped him pack up. He said he was going to drive to Nashville the next day, try to get his recording heard by some producers. He was excited, happy. Then he left. That was the last time I saw him. And the recording? Johnny asked. Samuel's expression darkened. That's the strange part. The next morning, when I came back to the studio, the tapes were gone. I'd left them on the machine to dry overnight. That was standard procedure back then. But they'd vanished, just like Tommy Joe. Johnny felt a chill run down his spine. He looked at the old microphone through the control room glass. It stood there in the recording room, silent and waiting, as it had for 20 years. Did they ever find anything? Any clue about what happened to him? Samuel shook his head. Nothing. It's like he just dissolved into the night. His family hired investigators. The police searched everywhere. But Memphis can swallow people up, Mr. Cash. Especially in those days. Especially young men with dreams. Johnny leaned back in his chair. Outside, the Memphis night was quiet. A distant siren wailed somewhere, then faded into nothing. Why are you still here, Samuel? After all that? The old man looked at his hands. They were still trembling slightly. Because I made a promise to his mother. She came here, must have been 1955. 5 years after he disappeared. She was dying. Cancer. She asked me to keep the studio open. Said that if Tommy Joe ever came back, he should find it still here. Still waiting. Samuel's voice cracked. She died 3 weeks later. And I've been here ever since. Johnny stood and walked back into the recording room. He placed his hand on the old microphone. It was cold to the touch. He thought about all the voices that had passed through it. All the dreams, all the songs, all the hopes. Samuel, Johnny called back to the control room. Can I hear my recording? There was a long pause. Then Samuel's voice came through the intercom, hesitant. Mr. Cash, I need to check something first. Johnny watched through the glass as Samuel rewound the tape. The old man's face grew increasingly troubled. He rewound it again, then again. Finally, he looked up at Johnny, his face ashen. It's not here. What do you mean it's not here? The recording. The tape is blank. Johnny pushed through the door back into the control room. Samuel played the tape for him. Nothing but white noise and the faint hum of the machine. 8 hours of recording time, and it was as if Johnny had never sung at all. This happened before, Samuel whispered, with Tommy Joe. I recorded him that night. I heard it playing back. It was beautiful, but the next morning, nothing. Johnny felt his heart racing. You're saying the same thing happened to my recording? Samuel nodded slowly. I don't understand it, Mr. Cash. I've recorded thousands of sessions. This has only happened twice. Tommy Joe in 1950, and you, tonight. Both in November. Both singing about going home. The room suddenly felt colder. Johnny looked around the small studio. The old photographs on the walls seemed to watch him. The microphone in the other room stood like a sentinel. There's something else, Samuel said, his voice barely above a whisper. Something I've never told anyone. He opened a drawer in the desk and pulled out an old reel-to-reel tape. It was dusty, the label faded but still readable. Tommy Joe Williams, November 18, 1950. You said the recording was gone, Johnny said. The original was, but I always made safety copies, just in case. I hid this one. Never told the police. Never told his family. Samuel's hands shook as he held the tape. Because I was afraid, Mr. Cash. I've been afraid for 20 years. Afraid of what? Of what I heard on this tape. Samuel loaded the tape onto the machine with trembling fingers. He pressed play. At first, there was nothing but tape hiss. Then, a voice emerged. Young, hopeful, raw with emotion. Tommy Joe Williams singing a song about a long road home. Johnny listened, transfixed. The song was remarkably similar to the one he'd just sung. Not the same words, not the same melody exactly, but the same feeling, the same longing, the same sense of searching for something forever out of reach. The song ended. There was silence on the tape. Then, Tommy Joe's voice again, speaking. How was that, Samuel? Samuel's voice, younger, more vibrant. That was perfect, Tommy Joe, just perfect. Think it'll get me to Nashville? I think it'll get you anywhere you want to go, son. Tommy Joe laughed. Thanks, Samuel. I'll see you next week when I get back. I'll bring you something from Nashville. Footsteps. The sound of a door closing. Silence. Then something else. Faint at first, growing louder. A voice, but not Tommy Joe's voice, and not Samuel's. A whisper, barely audible. Don't forget me. The tape continued. The whisper repeated, over and over, growing clearer. Don't forget me. Don't forget me. Don't forget me. Samuel stopped the tape. His face was pale, covered in sweat. I've only listened to this tape 3 times, Mr. Cash. Once the night it happened, once a year later, and once 10 years ago. Each time I hear that voice, I can't sleep for weeks. Because that voice, it's not on the recording. It's in the recording, like it's coming from inside the tape itself. Johnny sat in stunned silence. Outside, the Memphis night pressed against the windows. The studio, which had felt warm when he entered, now felt oppressive, as if the walls were closing in. What do you think it means? Johnny finally asked. Samuel looked at him with haunted eyes. I think some songs are more than just songs, Mr. Cash. I think some melodies exist in places we can't see. And I think that microphone, he pointed to the recording room, sometimes picks up more than just voices. Johnny thought about the melody that had been haunting him for days. Where had it come from? Was it really his? Or had he heard it somewhere else? In some place between waking and dreaming. I should go, Johnny said, standing up. Wait. Samuel reached into his desk and pulled out a piece of paper. He wrote something on it and handed it to Johnny. It was an address. Tommy Joe's sister. She still lives in Memphis. Been here all her life, hoping he'd come home. She's the only family he had left. If you ever want to know more about him, she's the one to talk to. Johnny took the paper and folded it into his pocket. He shook Samuel's hand. It was cold and trembling. Thank you, Samuel, for telling me the truth. Mr. Cash, Samuel said as Johnny reached the door. That song you sang tonight, don't try to record it again. Some songs aren't meant to be captured. Maybe they're meant to just exist, in the air, in the moment. Then let go. Johnny nodded and stepped out into the Memphis night. The cold air hit his face like a splash of water. He got in his car and sat for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the old studio building. The melody was still in his head, but it felt different now, less urgent, more like a memory than a haunting. Johnny didn't go straight back to Nashville. Instead, he drove through Memphis as dawn began to break, the city slowly waking up around him. He found the address Samuel had given him, a small house on the south side, with a neat garden and a wind chime hanging from the porch. He sat in his car for nearly an hour before finally working up the courage to knock on the door. An elderly woman answered. She must have been in her 70s, with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much sorrow. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Ma'am, my name is Johnny Cash. I know this is going to sound strange, but I wanted to talk to you about your brother, Tommy Joe." The woman's face went through a series of emotions, surprise, suspicion, then a deep, weary sadness. Finally, she stepped aside. "Come in, Mr. Cash. I recognize you. My brother loved your music. Funny that you should come here after all these years." Her name was Evelyn Williams. She made coffee and they sat in her small living room, surrounded by photographs of Tommy Joe, a young man with a kind face and dreamer's eyes, holding a guitar in almost every picture. "He was supposed to go to Nashville," Evelyn said, holding a photograph. "Had his whole life ahead of him. Then he just vanished, like smoke." "I'm sorry," Johnny said. "I can't imagine what that's been like for you and your family. Mama died believing he'd come back. I've lived my whole life in this house, hoping I'd hear his knock on the door one day." She set down the photograph. "Why are you here, Mr. Cash, after all this time?" Johnny told her about the studio, about Samuel, about the recording that disappeared. He didn't mention the voice on Tommy Joe's tape. Some things were too strange to share. But he told her about the song, about the melody that had led him to that studio. Evelyn listened quietly. When he finished, she stood and went to an old secretary desk in the corner. She opened a drawer and pulled out a stack of papers. "These are Tommy Joe's songs," she said. "He wrote dozens of them. Never got to record most of them. I've kept them all these years." She handed the stack to Johnny. "Maybe you'd like to look through them?" Johnny spent the next hour reading through Tommy Joe's lyrics. They were raw, unpolished, but filled with genuine emotion. Songs about loss, longing, hope, and the open road. And there, near the bottom of the stack, he found it. A song called "The Long Way Home." The lyrics were almost identical to the melody Johnny had been hearing in his head. Not word for word, but the feeling, the structure, the story. It was all there. "Did you find something?" Evelyn asked. Johnny held up the paper, his hand trembling. "This song. Did Tommy Joe ever play this for you?" "Oh yes, that was his favorite. He sang it all the time. Said it was about his journey, how he was going to Nashville to make his dreams come true, and then he'd come back home with his head held high. But the funny thing is," she paused, her brow furrowing. "He said he didn't write it. Said it came to him in a dream. Said he woke up one morning and it was just there, in his head, complete." The room seemed to tilt around Johnny. He steadied himself, taking a deep breath. "Mrs. Williams, could I keep this? Just for a little while?" Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "You know what, Mr. Cash? You can keep it. Tommy Joe would have wanted that. He admired you. If his song can live through your voice, then maybe he's not really gone." Johnny left Evelyn's house as the Memphis sun climbed higher in the sky. He drove back to Nashville in a daze, Tommy Joe's lyrics on the seat beside him. For weeks, Johnny tried to forget about that night, but the melody wouldn't leave him. If anything, it grew stronger. He'd wake up at 3 a.m., hearing it as clearly as if someone were singing it in his room. He didn't tell June about it, didn't tell anyone. How could he explain it? That he'd picked up a dead man's song from across time. That some melody had found him on a Memphis highway and led him to an old studio where recordings disappeared and voices whispered from tapes. But Johnny Cash was not a man to run from the unexplained. He'd spent time in darkness before, in addiction, in despair, in the depths of his own troubled soul. And he'd learned that the only way through darkness was straight ahead. One night in December, he made a decision. He called Samuel. "I want to come back," Johnny said. "I want to record that song again. Mr. Cash, I told you. I know what you told me. But I've been thinking about Tommy Joe, about his song, about why it found me. And I think I understand now." There was a long silence on the line. Then Samuel's weary voice, "When do you want to come?" "Tonight." Johnny drove back to Memphis through a light snow. It was late December now, and the city wore a thin blanket of white. Samuel's studio looked even more forlorn in the winter night, but the old man was waiting at the door. They didn't speak as they prepared. Samuel loaded fresh tapes. Johnny tuned his guitar. But this time, Johnny placed something on the music stand in front of the microphone. Tommy Joe's original lyrics. "I'm not singing my song tonight," Johnny said. "I'm singing his." Samuel looked at the yellowed paper and nodded slowly. "Maybe that's what needs to happen." Johnny stood in front of that old RCA microphone. He closed his eyes and thought about Tommy Joe, a young man with dreams. A young man who'd stood in this exact spot, in front of this exact microphone, singing about going home. A young man who'd vanished into the Memphis night and never returned. And Johnny sang. He sang "The Long Way Home" as if it were his own. He sang it with all the longing and hope and sorrow that Tommy Joe must have felt. He sang it for Evelyn, still waiting in her small house, He sang it for Samuel, carrying his guilt and his promise for 20 years. He sang it for every dreamer who'd ever come to Memphis with a song in their heart and found something else entirely. When he finished, there was silence. Johnny opened his eyes. Through the control room glass, he saw Samuel sitting very still, tears streaming down his face. Johnny removed the headphones and went to the control room. Samuel rewound the tape with shaking hands and pressed play. At first, there was nothing but hiss. Johnny's heart sank. It had happened again. But then, a voice. His voice, clear and strong. The Long Way Home played through the speakers, perfect and whole. And at the end, after the last note faded, there was something else, faint but unmistakable. Another voice, young and full of joy, speaking through the years. Thank you. Samuel and Johnny sat in the studio until dawn, listening to the tape over and over. The second voice never appeared again. It had said what it needed to say. Johnny Cash never released that recording. He kept it private, locked away with his most treasured possessions. But he did something else. In 1970, he performed The Long Way Home at the Grand Ole Opry. He dedicated it to all the dreamers who got lost on their way to Nashville. He didn't mention Tommy Joe by name, but Evelyn was in the audience that night, and when their eyes met during the song, she smiled. Samuel closed his studio in 1972. Before he did, Johnny bought the old RCA microphone from him. It sits in Johnny's home studio to this day, a reminder that some songs don't belong to one person. They belong to the air, to the moment, to the mystery of creation itself. Evelyn Williams died in 1985, still in the house where she'd waited for her brother. In her will, she left one thing to Johnny Cash, a small box containing all of Tommy Joe's songs. Johnny kept writing and performing for decades after that strange November night, but he never forgot the lesson of the lost recording studio. Some melodies exist beyond us, in places we can't see, carried by voices we can't hear. And sometimes, if we listen carefully enough, those songs find us, not to be captured, not to be owned, but to be honored, remembered, and passed along. Years later, in 2002, an antique dealer in Memphis found an old reel-to-reel tape in a box of estate sale items. The label was mostly worn away, but a date was visible, November 1969. Curious, the dealer played it on an old machine in his shop. He heard Johnny Cash singing a song he'd never heard before, The Long Way Home. Beautiful, haunting, perfect. And at the very end, so faint he almost missed it, another voice, younger, happier, saying one word, home. The dealer tried to research the recording, but no one seemed to know anything about it. It wasn't on any official discography. No record label had any documentation of it. It was as if the song had simply appeared out of nowhere. He donated the tape to the Country Music Hall of Fame, where it sits in their archives to this day, cataloged as Unknown Johnny Cash Recording, 1969. Sometimes late at night, when the museum is closed and the halls are empty, the archivists say they can hear music coming from the storage room. A guitar, a voice, a song about the long way home. But when they check, nothing is playing. The tapes are all secured. The machines are all off. Some songs, it seems, don't need machines to be heard. They just need someone willing to listen.